How's it going, everyone? Brennan C. Adams here, and I am sitting here with Mark J. Silverman, who's an executive coach, one of the top coaches out there. I'm going to be asking a series of questions. I have a lot of questions for you, which you had no prep on, so it's going to go right into the questions.
Hopefully, it's something I'm good at.
You'll be good at it because I know you, and I know you're going to give us some good content for today. But I want to start off by asking you, how did you get into being an executive coach? Tell me the journey leading up to that.
The journey to being an executive coach is a little bit more extended than just becoming a coach in general. So way back in about 2008, 2009 is when I hit some really serious burnout. I started having panic attacks and I started having issues selling. So I was a salesman in the tech industry.
Yeah.
And I wasn't able to, for some reason, I wasn't able to sell anymore. Like it just dried up. And I started getting sick, and my marriage broke up, and things really kind of fell apart. I actually got diagnosed and thought I was going to die. It was really,
wow.
It was really bad. I was sick and depressed, and at that point, I started to become suicidal. And so my last podcast was called Mastering Midlife. It's that midlife crisis kind of thing.
Yeah.
So my climbing back to healthy, I remember in 2008, I decided that if I was going to die, if that was true, that I needed to do three things. One, I wanted to run the Marine Corps Marathon, and I couldn't even run a mile.
Wow.
I was so sick, I couldn't even run a mile. I wanted to make $1 million to leave to my family.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to give $60,000 to charity just to feel better about myself. So I had those three goals. And while I was training for the marathon, I was listening to every self-help book known to man, every spiritual book. I was journaling, I was meditating, I was doing everything I could while I'm training for this marathon, which I thought was impossible. I hired a coach, and this was before you could do Zoom and that kind of thing. So we did phone calls, and he told me what to eat and how to train and all that. And he said I wouldn't be able to run the Marine Corps Marathon that year. It would take a year and a half. And I said, I don't know.
To prep for it.
Yeah, to prep. I said, I don't know if I'm going to be alive. So I had 8 months to train for it. So while I was listening to all this stuff and my mindset was changing, I ran the Marine Corps Marathon an hour faster than my coach even thought I could do it. I made the $1 million. I gave the $60,000 to charity. And I was healthier than I had ever been. My career was back on track, and my family was doing better. And what changed was my outlook on success, my outlook on work, because my drive to prove myself was what drove me to burnout. Right, that we didn't go all the way back to my story when I was homeless and living in my truck. There's a lot of drama in this story.
Yeah.
Right, I have that short Jewish Tony Robbins kind of success kind of story. But I always wanted to prove that I wasn't that homeless drunk guy. Right. That
you had something to prove to others.
I had something to prove to others. And once I started learning that there was an intrinsic thing about life, there was a way to approach life that wasn't about the external validations. I was like an ex-smoker. I couldn't wait to tell everybody, like, you're loved, you're fine the way you are. You can play this game a different way, and you didn't have to burn out anymore. I had a friend who bought a Bentley when he was about 50 years old and died a few months later, right? That kind of burnout. I watched a lot of my friends, their marriages fall apart like mine, their health fall apart. I watched, we go to Las Vegas, and the things that we did, that stayed in Las Vegas was not cool, and it wasn't helping us get where we want to go. So that's when I decided I was going to dedicate myself to helping other people. I still wasn't going to be a coach. I still wasn't ready. I didn't know what coaching was. I didn't even know that was a thing. I just knew I was going to help other people be successful a different way. Then I decided to go on a retreat when I was 50. I'm 60 now. So when I was 50 years old, I decided to go on a retreat. And the guy who was running the retreat called me and said, I have a hunch about you. And I'm like, you don't even know me. Mm-hmm. He says, yeah, but I have this hunch and I always follow my hunches. He says, you should do my coaching program. And I said, what's coaching? And he told me what coaching was.
You didn't know what coaching even was.
I didn't even know what coaching was. I didn't know it existed. So I said, I'm a salesman, right? Like, how am I supposed to be a coach? I don't know what that is. He told me what it was, and he said it would make me a better salesman. It would make me a better husband, a father, that kind of thing. And so I did his coaching program. And when I was telling my ex-wife about it, my ex-wife was like, Oh my God, Mark, I've been telling you that you need to teach the companies you work for what you do all these years. We thought it was like HR or something like that. And I needed to make $500,000 a year just to keep my family and
Mm-hmm.
my elderly parents and everybody going. So I could never take that kind of a job. She said, coaching is what you should do. And she depended on me. You know, she didn't work and she was home with the kids.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to become a coach. So at that point, I was much more of a life coach kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of my clients, my first clients were all my past customers in the tech industry, which was really interesting, but it was much more life coachy. It wasn't until a couple years into it, and I did all my work, and I worked with shaman and sex and relationship coaches, and went into the
Yeah.
desert, and then worked with business coaches and all kinds of stuff, that I started realizing that I missed putting on, my solid gold watch, my Hugo Boss suit. I
Yeah.
miss being in glass buildings. So once I made that realization that I actually like working with business people, I like working with people in corporate America who are just put nose to the grindstone, burning the candle at both ends and still trying to raise a family and still trying to stay healthy and still trying to keep their relationships going, that my career just absolutely took off. So that's how I became an executive coach. So now, my clients naturally evolve through word of mouth to be people in the C-suite, executives who are learning leadership skills at such a high level. So that's what I do.
Wow. That quite the story. From running the marathon to the $1 million to the 60 grand. I'm curious, what charity did you give the 60,000 to?
Oh, I gotta remember back then. I gave some to the Whitman Walker Clinic. I gave some to cancer research, and then I gave a bunch to an orphanage in Africa.
I bet that felt good.
It felt great. It felt really good.
That's
My
awesome.
ex-wife and I, every Christmas, we would fly to Florida to see our parents, and on the plane there, we would tithe, and we would take 5% of our income and write
give
checks
back. Yeah.
to charity. So it felt like that. It felt good to give back.
So you were a leader. In your opinion, I mean, you work with a lot of leaders. What are the top qualities it takes to become a leader? Like what are the qualities to be an effective leader?
That changed for me over the years. I used to think it was charisma and being powerful and that kind of thing. And now what I believe it is yes, you have to have a vision, right? You have to know where you want to go. You have to be comfortable leading people in that vision. But I think honesty is a huge one. And when I say honesty, I don't just mean integrity. I mean, you need to be able to speak your mind to your people. You need to be able to speak your vision.
Authentic and just be you.
You need to, but you also, you need to understand them. You need to be able to have the hard conversations, the feedback conversations. You need to, and you also need to be comfortable being lonely. I think being a leader, you need to be comfortable.
It's so true.
Being the tip of the spear.
Yeah.
And when you're the tip of the spear, which is why I have a waiting list for my clients, is because most of those people don't have someone they can talk to candidly, who will be honest with them back. So you have to be really self-sufficient in that way.
I can see, because you think the clients you work with are very high level people that most people probably in some way praise them, or nobody's going to give them the real life in the face mirror of, hey, you need to hear this.
When your survival depends on that person you're giving the feedback to, you're going to shade that feedback. Now, of course, when you're speaking to power, you want to show respect. You want to always be supportive of that person, but you want to be able to give them the information that they need to make the decisions and choices that they do.
It's so true. What from your perspective, like what is emotional intelligence, and why is it essential for leaders?
So I have the wrong definition of emotional intelligence. Every time I talk to an expert,
Yeah.
they're like, no, Mark, that's not emotional intelligence. So I'm going to give you my version of emotional intelligence. And that's the ability to be grounded and centered in all situations. That's the ability to have your wits about you and not have your ego take you flying off in one direction or another, right? Even
Which
when,
can be hard.
And by the way, your emotions may take you. You can still be emotionally intelligent and be triggered. How do you responsibly communicate when all the alarm bells are going on in your body? How do you say to someone, you know what, right now, I'm pretty angry. I'm really not sure what to say. So I'm going to take a moment to cool off. Or I'm going to take a moment to let you just tell me more of your side of the story. right? So if you can do that while your body's on 5-alarm fire, that to me is emotional intelligence.
Which sometimes is difficult to do.
Right.
When things are happening, it's like not letting your emotions affect, and then you speak right away.
Yeah.
Because some people just speak out of emotion, which can be very bad as a leader.
I teach people, taking a breath, right? If you can take a breath and just wait a beat,
Yeah.
Then I teach them to say thank you. I was actually in a meeting when I was a sales guy with a whole C-suite leadership team, and there was one ex-military guy who was on the leadership team, and every time someone spoke, he would just say thank you in that very military, very respectful way. And I watched him as, when he asked questions, he would just say thank you. Or if someone would confront him on something, he would say thank you, and he would take a beat, and then he would respond. So by saying thank you, it gives your body and that thing that Michael Bungay Stanier calls the advice monster, that thing that wants to jump out and speak, a chance to kind of right size.
I like that. I've never actually heard that. Thank you.
Something new.
Thank you. So how can leaders build a high performing team, and what are some strategies for achieving this?
So performing a high performance team, that takes a lot of work. It's not just them. So coaching is a big part of it. So having those meetings where you do personality tests, you need to understand what motivates everybody on the team, what triggers everybody on the team, right? You need to understand everybody's communication style. So doing Enneagram, the 6 working geniuses, DISC, any of those personality tests, then having a meeting about those things. The other thing that's really useful is when I work with my clients, I do a 360 interview process where I interview a bunch of people who they work with, above them, below them. Sometimes I'll even do spouses to get some real insight.
That's got to be some real interesting conversations.
Every once in a while, when I do the spouses, I get such a key insight that I wouldn't have gotten from somebody else. But once I do that, then what we do is in those meetings, we have them talk about what is their development plan? What are you working on? How can I help you speak up more? Or how can I help you speak less in a meeting?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So once you do that, then that builds a camaraderie, that builds an honesty. So that trust and honesty has to be first before anything else, before execution, before commitment, before any of that. That trust and honesty has to be there.
So executives have a lot going on. How can an executive avoid burnout and stress? I mean, what are some things they can do to avoid that complete mental breakdown? Even
it's the cliches. It's playtime, it's downtime, it's relationship time, it's exercise, it's healthy food. I mean, like our morning routine before we did this.
Yeah.
Both of us went off and did our morning routine, so we could come at this at best, right? Like I wasn't going to do this interview with you without exercising. Mm-hmm. What does that have to do with me talking to you? But I had to exercise, I had to meditate, I had to do my thing so that I could show up best for you. You went off to the gym and you wound up taking a really ice cold shower, right? and came back and drank your recovery drink, and now you're at your best. So now we're showing up.
And then I'm drinking my coffee with espresso, so don't forget that part.
So it's all the usual subjects. It's I talk about allostatic load a lot. And allostatic load. Yeah, allostatic load is that amount of stress, the amount of things you're keeping up with inside. So like you wake up in the morning and you open up Twitter, and now you know who to be mad at. Right. Then you watch Fox News or MSNBC. Now you know who to hate. Right. Then your kid spills the milk and you're on the way. You're late for work. Right. And as soon as you get, so you're pulling out the driveway, and if your allostatic load is up here, you have very little capacity to give people a mulligan. So when you're pulling out the driveway and someone cuts you off, you're sitting there wondering, like, do I have enough insurance and do I have enough time to go chase those people down? Where if your allostatic load was low, you'd be like, oh, they must, bless them. They must be in a hurry, give them the opportunity. So anything you can do to lower that allostatic load. If you're gaming all night, or if you're drinking, each night, and I'm not saying these things are bad, but if you're not exercising, those things raise your allostatic load so you have less capacity for the assholes in life.
Sleep is important too. I'd say that, especially when traveling. I'm this is kind of off topic, just question. I'm curious, when you're traveling all the time. Even look at an executive who's traveling on planes, hotels. what can they do to put themselves in a position to still perform at a higher level without that kind of like lacking? Because let's face it, red eyes or hotel rooms or getting thrown in different situations can mess with your schedule, which doesn't allow you always to have that perfect routine.
Right. So almost every executive I start to work with who travels a lot has that running on fumes kind of vibe. Like
I know what it's like.
I've just been in, I was just in Dubai. I was just in London. I was just in San Francisco. Oh my God. And after a while, I can convince them to kind of do what I do. So when I travel, I bring my own breakfast with me. Right. So I bring my shake mix and all that. So I actually bring my own coffee.
Oh, wow.
Right. Make sure I'm up at 5:15 in the morning to do my meditation in my room. So I try to get them to have some semblance of routine when they're traveling. Most people won't do the extent you and I do. People ask me, how are you Zen Master Flash most of the time? That's my job, actually, right? So my job is to put my shit together in the morning so that I can be even Steven for anybody who shows up on the other side of my Zoom call, whoever I'm coaching, right? And if that starts to run out during noon, I have to reset that because my job is to show up.
So you can perform at the highest level for your job.
Right. So people aren't going to do what you and I do. Most people, but what can they put in? And that exercise thing is kind of jacks or better. I've told clients I will not coach them if they don't exercise. Grown men who are supposed to be in an office, who were former athletes, that kind of thing. Like if they're not exercising, you're just playing whack-a-mole with behaviors, and you get them to the gym and it changes.
It's crazy what it does for your behavior, your emotional being, and people that don't exercise. I feel the same way. Also, like if people don't take care of their health, I feel like they're lacking in other areas of their life, and that may seem very extreme, but it's true. They are not performing at their highest level because pure laziness, and lack of commitment and discipline.
And I will say, when you have kids and you have a job, it's very easy to fall into that rut of what can get off my plate. And taking care of ourselves is the first thing that comes off our plate when we have a family to take care of, when we have a demanding job. And what we don't understand is that putting those things back in, because that's the hard thing that I have to convince people, is that you playing golf on the weekend twice a month is actually good for your family and good for your job. It's not selfish. It's selfish with a capital S, so you can show up better. And if you have a conversation with your spouse, that I need this time to go to yoga class, or I need this, I will show up better for you. But I have to spend a lot of time convincing people that doing self-care of some sort is part of their job and makes them better at their job.
So good. Everybody needs to listen to that one. What are some communication tips that leaders can use to effectively connect with their teams?
The first one is always curiosity. Right?
Curiosity.
You'll hear that on every podcast, on every leadership, and every difficult conversation. If you can get curious, people will open up. I'm curious. I don't understand why you've been late every day. You've been late every day for the last 6 months. Mm-hmm. Help me understand what's going on, instead of you've been late, figure it out. And then you'll be like, well, my elderly mother's at home and I have to give her insulin shots and I have to do this. Like, oh shit, okay.
So you don't know the whole story.
Right?
Ask
so
a
now
question.
Okay, how can we help you? Should we shift your hours? Should we, what can we do? Getting curious is the first thing to get people to open up. It also is, if there's no explanation for being late every day, now you can say, okay, so we have an agreement that you're here at this, at this meeting at this time. How can we, going forward, how can we ensure that happens, and then creating a strong agreement? So that's the other piece that's really important, is people have these expectations, right? Like they walk away from a meeting thinking, all right, everybody's got their action items, or everybody understands what they need to do, and just walking away, instead of taking that extra mile thing of closing the loop and saying, so do you understand, does everybody understand what's their action item? Do you understand what you're responsible for? Does anybody have any questions or any concerns, right? And then you close that loop. Are we all in agreement? Great. Are we all in agreement that if we're not going to keep the agreement, that we're going to communicate?
That's good.
Right? Like, so I don't have to be looking in my rearview mirror, right? If I'm the CEO, I don't want to be looking in my rearview mirror. If you're not going to meet that deadline, You're going to let us know in plenty of time, right? Great. Now we have an agreement.
That's good. Also, I would add tone of voice, how you ask a question. You could ask in this way, or you could ask it in this way, more compassionate.
You can. I have a client who was relating to me what he said in his leadership meeting, in his team meeting, and in the tone of voice he was using was just dripping with condescension and anger, and I was like, and I just said, so I'm just curious, is this how you presented everything in the meeting? He said, oh yeah, exactly. I said, do you understand the condescension and anger that was in your words and what you had to say? It's like, what are you talking about? I'm just explaining myself. I'm just thinking out loud. I said, it's time for you to go back and now ask for feedback from the team members that you trust, how they took what you said.
Feedback is important.
Because I know he didn't mean it that way, but it was coming out that way as he was musing. It was just came out so condescending. So yeah, you have to check your communication style.
You know, one way to tackle somebody if they ever say something like, let's say, mean to you or confronting or in an anger way, you stop, you pause, look him in the eyes and say, are you okay? And then just sit there. And I found that as a way to dissolve that emotion. And they might say, I'm not okay.
If you're yelling, if you're really that angry, you're not okay.
Yeah, you're not okay. It's not even about what you're talking about. It's something else that's going on in their life, which they're just kind of taking on you. All right, so can you discuss some of the decision-making strategies that you teach executives on making better decisions?
That's a good that one needs a little thought. And decision making, because it depends on what it is. Is it about people? Is it about business direction?
Could be anything. You pick maybe decision making strategies on a regular task that they have, or about certain people in their organization.
Right. So the first thing I do is, if it's an important decision that they're angsty over, it's grounded and centered.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get to grounded and centered? Now, how do you take the emotional pieces out of there? So I had a conversation this morning before we started with a client who was really emotional about a decision. So I had to unhook what's not true, what is he making up about the situation, and then what is left that's real. So how do you make a decision with the real cards that are on the table? So that's the first thing, is what are you making up about the situation? What do you know about the situation? Then what information do you need? Like, who do you need to talk to get a complete picture to make that decision? And again, it's different, just like your kids. Each kid is parented different. Each person is different. I have people who just do things by gut instinct, and their stretch is to get more information and slow down. They just make decisions too quickly, and they wind up wasting time and resources. Then I have people who have analysis paralysis. And how do I get them to just know that they can't make a mistake?
Just do.
Right? So it depends on, which direction they're coming from. So that's why it's a hard question to answer.
I mean, that's a good answer. Now, going to another question. Time management is very crucial for leaders. Can you share just some productivity tips and time management strategies?
So I don't believe you can manage time. So my book, Only Tens, is not really about time management. Yeah. I say you don't have a time management problem, you have an honesty problem.
That's right?
Good. It's more about energy management, and it's also about communication. So saying no to almost everything is really, when you're climbing the ladder, when you're moving up, the important thing is you say yes to almost everything. Right. And you work yourself to the bone to get to a certain point where you have opportunity. At some point, saying no to almost everything is the most important thing. But really, for me, sitting down, and I call them my tens, only tens, right? Figuring out what are the things that absolutely have to be done by you, and absolutely have to be done by you today. That clears up the decks so much. If it has to be done by you, and has to be done by you today. Because I believe that everything that we do is to avoid a consequence or get a reward. I don't think we do anything for the intrinsic value of the thing. Maybe art, right? But then we want the feeling of creativity. But what is it that we're trying to accomplish? What's the most important goal? And usually there's only 1, 2, or 3 really important things that day, like essential, that only you can do only you can do today, right? So that's how I help them figure it out.
I like
I,
it.
I clear almost all the all the shoulds, all the distractions away.
How can leaders delegate tasks effectively?
First, they have to be willing, right? So you have to go through the reasons why people won't delegate in the first place. And
Yeah.
there's a whole bunch of those reasons. Are you the hero? Like, are you the only person who can do it the right way? Are you afraid people are going to screw it up? Are you a control freak? Like, there's a lot of people who just get their self-esteem from doing all those things. I sometimes when I finally get leaders to delegate a lot, they go through this crisis of, well, what is my job? What do I
Mm,
actually do?
mm.
Right. So that's how, but the willingness to do it, and finding out why you don't do it. Then the next piece is the hard thing that people have is the accountability feedback loop when you delegate, right? How do you delegate? And then when the work comes back and it's not the way you want it or the way you need it, are you willing to teach and coach and have and iterate until you bring that person up to the level that you need to do? So again, as you move up the ladder, your job is more and more to coach and less to do. It's more and more to teach, less and less to do, unless you're the CEO. And then when you're the CEO of
Yeah.
a significant company, you have to hire competent people, right? You can't spend all your time coaching. But a significant amount of time is getting people up to snuff and then creating other leaders on your team by delegating, by helping them. Like sometimes you have to delegate and then work alongside them at
Yes.
first. Then sometimes you delegate, then you can get them, you delegate, and then you check their work and send it back. Then you can delegate and you can turn your back and you get the kind of work.
You got to let people work freely and let them kind of learn on their own. Otherwise, they're going to feel like they're always needed to go to you.
I had a client who was in the C-suite, and he was the kind of guy that everybody loved to work with, and no matter what company he went to, all his people followed him from startup to startup, right? But he was the nice guy leader. So he's the one who stayed up till 2 o'clock in the morning fixing everybody's work. Right? They'd bring him work and he'd fix it until 2 o'clock in the morning. Then he'd present it to the larger leadership team and all that kind of stuff. There was another leader who was a bit of an asshole. And he goes, I don't understand. He gives his people an order, they take care of it, and it's always good, and they just bring it back, properly. And I said, okay, but he says, but he's an asshole. I said, great. You're the nice guy. You work until 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
He's an asshole, and you call him the lawn chair guy. What can you learn from him, though? Right? There's a bunch of stuff he can learn from you about relationship and empathy and growing your people. What can you learn from him? He says he just doesn't accept subpar work. So what do you do? So I accept it and I stay up until 2 o'clock in the morning and fix it. What can you do differently? Right? And it's the hard thing. It's okay, I can actually coach them and send it back and have them do it better and show them and over and over and over. Now, these people have followed him for years from company to company to company. So him changing that style was a little rough on some people who were just used to being taken care of.
That's good. How can leaders learn to accept change and make it work for their organizations? It's a really good question. I'm challenging today.
Yeah, no. Let's see. How can
I'll say it again. How can leaders learn to accept change and make it work for their organizations?
So that's a decision. It's a choice. It's a mindset choice of can I be fluid? Can I become a person who actually welcomes change? And that's the first thing you have to do is be able to feel safe. So I hate to talk about these like inner things, but if I don't teach someone to feel safe, change is scary. And instead of reacting to change on a 3 on a level of scale of 1 to 10, it's going to be an 8. So I have to get them to understand that no matter what's coming at them, and that takes more than just in the moment, which is one of your future questions. I think I cheated, but you have to know that in the moment, no matter what comes at you, you are okay, right? So what the Navy SEALs say, work the problem. So if you can stay in the moment, and then work whatever problem's coming, then you're in better shape. But you have to make a decision that I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be fluid and porous when things happen and just pivot as they go along.
The next question is my favorite question because it's a question that I literally created a whole TV show and book on, and it is, what is your definition of success and how can other leaders achieve it?
My definition of success. My definition of success is not being a slave to what you think your definition of success is. So my definition of success is if you're chasing something. So like, I love Michael Jordan. Like Michael Jordan was my hero growing up. Michael Jordan, Cal Ripken, and Garth Brooks were my three heroes.
I love Garth
Brooks and George Strait.
I got friends in low places, baby.
No, and George Strait. Those were my guys, right? And what I learned about Cal Ripken and Michael Jordan is that the things that made them amazing also made them unhappy. Right? That drive, that like if you watched the special on the Bulls and you just saw Michael Jordan sitting there with his bourbon or scotch or whatever he was drinking, and you looked at the pain in his face, he couldn't enjoy his success. So there's, if you're making sacrifices to your health for a specific version of your success, if you're destroying your family for that success, other people will go, "Oh my God, you're amazing because you did this thing." But did you actually live an entire life? For me, life is in the moment. For me, life is, and it's not the softer thing. It's, am I satisfied? Am I in the moment? Am I connected to other people? For me, that's success. But I guess let's go back to, for me, if you're sacrificing some of the important things of life and you're miserable, but you get the goal, I don't believe you're successful, even though the world will tell you you're successful. I don't think Michael Jordan is successful.
Yeah, this could go in many directions. I think that anybody that's achieved let's say being a GOAT, right? You can look at a Tom Brady, a Michael Jordan, whoever. What they had to do to get to that, they had to sacrifice relationships, family. I mean, so many things. And I know people that know Michael Jordan and know more about them. Other people don't. So what price are you willing to pay? And is it like, or when they're at that top or that trophy or winning that award, are they actually truly happy? And is it what they thought it would be?
I watched a special on happiness, and they were talking about the rickshaw people in China who for 20 hours a day just pull rickshaws and then go home to their families and get 2 hours sleep and that kind of thing. And their level of happiness is actually higher than most Americans.
I've heard that.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we're striving and buying toys to fix the angst, there's a reason that streaming services, like there's 75 streaming services and we pay for all of them. There's a reason why there's bourbon bars and wine bars and beer. There's reasons why these things that numb us are what our go-tos. We work really hard. Very few of us play hard. We think we play hard by drinking and partying and all that stuff, but very few of us go out and do sports on the weekend, right? Like that kind of play hard. So if you're numbing yourself in order to deal with the success, what it takes to be successful, I don't think you're successful.
It's easy. Well, even personally over the years, it's easy to start doing those things that numb yourself, and then you stop and realize like, oh, this could be an issue. Whether that's drinking too much or it's not spending any time with your family. And I mean, I personally still deal with it as I go on my road because sometimes I have to stop and look. Like you've called me up before and kind of coached me in a way. I realize, oh, is this okay? Am I doing the right things?
I've seen you look really tired.
Yeah.
And you're too fucking young to be that tired.
Yeah. And I think we all, I mean, I don't think if you're really going after something, I think we're all going to have the moments where we're going to be like, okay, maybe I need to make some tweaks because this is not working. And it's going down a very toxic path that could be a bad ending. Okay, next question. Bringing healthy leadership into this kind of good transition. Bringing healthy leadership into family life is a topic that you cover. How can leaders balance their work and personal lives?
Again, it's the same thing. It's the same exact thing. Honesty. Can you have honest conversations with your significant other? Can you have honest conversations with your kids? Can you have agreements? Can you actually talk out the things you need to talk out? So I was interviewing when I first started thinking about writing leadership books and doing podcasts and things like that. Before that, I interviewed a couple of my former leaders that I worked with, and they all said the most important thing was to have a spouse who was on board. And I was surprised because these were hard driving people.
Yeah.
And they said, we had a conversation. Do we want to be on this ride together? And their wives all said, yes, this is what we want to do. So that was a partnership, right? To work the long hours, to do the travel.
But easier said than done once you start going on that road.
Exactly.
Trust me.
But they made that,
Yeah.
and you have to adjust. Sometimes it's too much, right? Like you didn't know how long.
You got to renegotiate, conversate.
And so that those honesty conversations, and then I talk. I coach mostly men. I coach a few women, but mostly men. And I talk about being a leader in your marriage, right? Showing up. And, even if your wife is a powerful lawyer or has her own career and all that, she still wants to know that you're showing up powerfully, that you're making dinner reservations, that you're making decisions, you're a part. A lot of men just kind of go, I'm working, you make the decisions about the house, you make the decisions about the kids and all that. No, they want a partner, right? Show up as an equal partner in your marriage.
That's good. One other thing, I mean, you kind of said this, but communication and having the tough conversations that you need to have, where you just sit down and have them, and it might be very 60 minutes of intense, it hurts, but you got to do it because it will help you in the long run. Communication.
Huge thing though is it's a learned skill.
Yeah.
I am a conflict avoidant person by nature. I am a people pleaser by nature. My book, I didn't realize it until years later when I got personality tested, is my book is a treatise on how to actually set boundaries, how to speak your mind. Nobody would ever know that I was a people pleaser or that I didn't speak my mind now because I've trained myself to speak up. Something's not going on. Something's not quite right here. Right. And I'm not sure what it is, but I want to bring it to the forefront. Or when you said this, it impacted me this way. I really don't want to hurt. This relationship is precious to me. That's why I'm bringing this up. So you can learn to have these frank conversations. You just have to be willing to be nervous. You have to be willing to be scared. And you have to feel safe enough to know that if it goes south, you're going to be okay.
We've had these conversations.
Yes, we have.
Yes. That's why open communication is, I found in the best business partnerships and relationships is people that can have an open conversation. Because the people that can't, they will either not speak up and hold it in, and eventually it's a huge breakup, or, that's what it is. It just doesn't work out. You open conversation. Okay, next question is, can you talk about some of the challenges that you've helped executives overcome, and what strategies have you used to help them?
Sure. How much time do we have? So I specialize in the bull in the china closet, the person who is just so driven, who is goal oriented, and you want them on the team. They're going to take things over to the finish line. You hand something to them, it's going to be done. It's going to be done well. The problem is they leave wreckage in the past, right? Wreckage on either side. So one of the things I do with someone like that is I have them walk into meetings and walk around and just notice how people are in the room when they walk in. Notice people. Do they shrink? Do they grow when you speak? Just spend the next 2 weeks before we talk, and call me in between if you notice something, because you're going to notice things. How are people when you walk in the room? And that consciousness exercise is huge, because people come back and they go, I had no idea. I had one CEO that I worked with who just didn't feel in touch with his team. The company wasn't doing as well as it should. And his job for 2 weeks was to go out for lunch with each person on the team and not talk about business, just ask questions. And he came back with, I didn't know this about this person. I didn't know they were dealing with this. And I didn't know that. Like, just do that, right? So now he has these relationships on his team. Then I have people who don't speak up in meetings, right? I'll be hired because so-and-so is a rock star. They're amazing. I need more of them. I need them to be a trusted advisor because they're always right on point, but they just don't speak up. So how do I get them to actually inhabit that leadership position, speak their mind, and understand they're a leader in the company, right? Usually that's someone who's, like the youngest person who not, and again, the youngest person who isn't the brash person who is a little overinflated, but they're like, how did I get on the leadership team? Right? Because you're super talented, and because when you speak, it's usually right. So how do we get you to speak up?
That's great for leaders, because even myself sometimes forget to ask the questions that aren't business related, to really get to know the person and ask them how they are doing. It's good. How important is accountability in leadership, and how can leaders create a culture of accountability in their organizations?
Again, I was working with one leader who his people just weren't hitting their goals, and he would give them, like they do the assignments would go out on the leadership team, and the things wouldn't get done. So I had to have a conversation with him about, how many times did you exercise this week? Once. How many times did you commit to exercising this week? 4 times. Did you keep your word to yourself? No. How we do one thing is how we do everything. If you're not keeping your word to yourself, one of the things on your 360 was you are late to every meeting. Well, I'm on other meetings, I'm like, yes, you're late to every meeting. What does that say to your people? Got it, right? Okay, so keeping my word to myself for my exercise helps me keep my word to my people. Me keeping my word to my people gives me, and even if it's like as petty as the moral authority to hold people accountable. Like there's these CEOs is like, I'm the CEO, I don't have to be accountable, but you do. And that just doesn't last. It works for a little while, but it doesn't last. You have to be as accountable as you want other people to be. It's a mirror.
That's good. Okay, now I want to go into success stories, because you've worked with so many amazing executives. You've transformed people's lives, which allowed companies to grow in their revenue, to grow their team, to have success in all areas, even have their significant others say thank you for what you've done for my husband or for my wife. So can you share just some success stories of executives you worked with and the achievements they've had from working directly with you?
Sure. One of my favorites is I started working with a couple of people on a leadership team of a startup that was just growing at ridiculous amounts. And this young guy was on the leadership team, and he was one of the worked 3 times as hard as everybody else, was 3 times as smart as everybody else, but was younger, had a more immature demeanor than other people. He wasn't more immature, but he just had that. He just showed up that way. And I said, "What's your goal?" He says, "Well, we want to open up our offices in Europe, and I want to be the CEO of Europe." I said, "Great. So our work is to make you the guy. I don't know that you're going to be picked, but we want to make it so that you're the obvious choice to be picked to be CEO of Europe." So we've been working together for 4 years now. So 2 years into it, he was like, "I don't know that I even want to do that anymore." So we kind of shelved that. But we worked on his leadership skills and his showing up as a, because he said when I first met him, he felt like he had to bring the gray hairs into the meetings to have gravitas, right? And I got him to dress a little bit sharper, show up a little bit taller, and then even taught him how to breathe before he walks into a meeting. Because when I'm breathing for a podcast, I talk differently than when I'm just talking out. So how do you show up in a room? So they decided they're going to open up their offices last year in Europe, and the CEO said, "So you're the guy. You're taking over Europe." And he's like, "Mark, I'm going to be the CEO of Europe." And then I went, holy shit, do you remember that was our goal? That you were going to be the obvious choice to lead the team in Europe? And he's like, completely forgot. I was talking to the CEO. I said, that was our goal when you hired me to work
Wow,
with this
that's
guy, for
huge.
this guy to be
Life changing. Wow.
it wasn't even like he had to put his hat in the ring. He was the guy. So that's the kind of growth.
You help them become the guy or the girl.
Yeah.
That's solid. Wow. I get chills on that one. That's good. How can leaders foster a culture of innovation and creativity within their teams?
They have to be open to bad ideas, right?
That's good.
Right, like that. The whole
No idea is
brainstorming thing,
dumb.
right? The whole brainstorming thing. You have to give people the leeway to make mistakes. I just interviewed Gary Ridge, who's the CEO of WD-40. And
Mhm.
WD-40 is considered one of the top places in the entire world to work. Their job satisfaction scores are huge. And the thing he said was, I don't hire for competency, I hire for values. So we have our values on our website, right? Before you even apply, these are our values. If these aren't your values, don't come to work here. He says, I am okay with anybody making any decision in this company for any reason, as long as they made the decision against these values. If they made the decision and it was a wrong decision, but it was because of these values, I'm okay with mistakes. So you have to have a culture of, you can make mistakes, no ideas too dumb. We're willing to hear things out. The other thing is, and just in your language. One of the things I teach really quickly, and it's such a quick win, is reflective listening. Instead of going, that's a bad idea, which I have to teach most of my clients.
Yeah.
You can't
They
say
react.
that.
Yeah.
You can't say that.
Yeah.
You have to say, so what you're saying is this, this, and this. That's your idea, and this is what you think it's going to do. Great. Let's explore that a little further. Here's where I see the pitfalls, right? Once people feel heard, then they're in conversation. If they don't feel heard, they're not going to come to you with another idea.
That's good. Being open, no idea is stupid, and being heard. Can you talk about some common leadership mistakes that you've seen executives make, and how can they avoid them? Common mistakes that leaders
So one
make.
common mistake is just making decisions about people. So if you make a decision about a person that they're no good, they're incompetent, they're this or that, and that person has no way of changing your mind. Saying, I work in a lot of organizations where once the boss has decided they're not okay, no matter what they do, they can't redeem themselves. That's a common mistake. Other common mistakes are not giving honest feedback. Just not being honest with the people. What I expect of you, what I want from you, how to communicate with me, and when I'm unhappy with you, like just not being honest.
Honesty is key. What advice do you have for new leaders who are just starting in their careers?
Get a sense of self. Right? So if you're a new leader, you probably got that job because you were better at the job than anybody else. You're probably more competent. You probably worked harder, right? You've had some success. Your job now is success through others. Your center of gravity is completely different. You no longer get accolades for scoring a basket or a touchdown, right? That's not you anymore. You're the guy on the side or the girl on the side that is supporting the person to go get the goal, right? So you have to learn to get your satisfaction from inside, because you're not going to get all the accolades. They're going to get the accolades. You have to want to see people succeed more than you want yourself to succeed. You'll get your accolades later when you build an incredible team. When you do, but
Invest in the people.
It's delayed. So you have to, you're going to feel useless. Like it's even in my job. People forget. I'll have a conversation with someone about something really tough that they're about to do. And I'll coach them and they'll triumph. And then they'll forget that I had a conversation with them that was the thing that turned, their mindset on that.
Hmm.
My job is to not go, a lot of in the coaching industry, in order to keep your clients hooked, your job is to constantly show them that you were the value. I don't like to do that. My job is to be a light switch, right? To be here when they need, help them get to where they need to go.
I like that. Be a light switch. That's good. Do you believe there's leadership trends like that are happening or techniques? And if there are, how do you stay on top of those trends?
I think that, I think the empathy trend is, like because the job market is so competitive right now, meaning getting good people is so hard. And I hear a lot about how Gen Zs and don't want to work and all that. No, they just have different values, right? They don't want to die for their job now. They want their job to support a whole entire life. So it's a whole thing. So that the trend of bashing this next generation of workers, I think is wrong, but it's so in vogue. But I do think that, that's an interesting trend now. The trend of there has been a trend of empathy and vulnerability, which has sacrificed professionalism.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of conversations with people about, yes, they should care that you're dealing with this. Yes, this. And there's a certain amount of professionalism that we need to show up with. I was listening to Seth Godin talk to, I'm trying to remember, Tim Ferriss?
Tim Ferriss.
And they were talking about professionalism. And they said, so your surgeon comes in to perform an operation on you, and he's having a bad day. Do you want him to come in and talk to the nurses and say, oh my God, this is going on in my life, or do you want him to be able to compartmentalize and show up as a professional and handle your shit? Right. So I have a lot of, so it's balancing that is really the hard thing, is balancing the human, the vulnerability, the connection with, and there's shit to be done. How do we do both?
Finally, what is next for you in your coaching practice, and what's exciting? What different exciting projects are you currently working on?
So for me next, I've exhausted my one-on-one practice. I'm not taking any new clients in that. So going to group programs is what's next for me. The Rising Leader program, the first public cohort is May 3rd. And that's where we take what I do with my clients, leading up, leading across, leading your team, and leading yourself. Teaching them that is en masse. Like I want to be able to bring this. A long time ago, when my ex-wife said to me, "The world needs what you have to offer.
Yeah.
Companies need what you have to offer." This is the fulfillment of what she said. I can now do this with 20 or 40 people and impart and make it, move that needle on how do you become a trusted advisor with your CEO? How do you lead in a team of powerful peers? How do you lead your team better? And how do you enjoy your life while you're doing all this stuff? Right. So that's what's next for me. The book is going to come out, I think, about May, June, the Rising Leader Handbook. So that's what's next for me.
So I can vouch for you. I've worked with you for a few years now, and I've seen directly like what you've done as a leader, but also your coaching style. And you are, I say this, the top executive coach I know out there, and how you transform people's life. No different than that CEO, that story you told that ended up getting that position, but like families' lives, the people around them, you make them better people. So where can they directly go to check out the Rising Leader program?
Just go to my website, markjsilverman.com, marktheletterjsilverman.com. And the podcast, the Rising Leader podcast there, the program's there. There's a bunch of free resources also.
So I'm going to do a part 2. We're going to have people come back to this. I'm going to do a part 2 with you where I'm going to go even deeper, but that's it for today. But tune in later for part 2 of this interview where we're going to go deeper with Mark J. Silverman. And make sure you check out everything he's got going on at markjsilverman.com. Have a good day, everybody.